An insane Colts 2024 season has come to a merciful end. Well, there's still 3 games left, but their shot at the playoffs is officially gone. We're going to talk about it here in just a second. Let's go. Colts lose out of the playoffs. Let's go.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day, or first post-game listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we want to remind you guys that you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at HorseshoeHuddle.com. And my partner, Jake Arthur, is here as always, looking great at 8:30 p.m. right now. Jake, we're having fun, right? This is a little late for us, but we are amped up following this dreadful game, amped up with so many different emotions right now that we're going to throw in your face here on today's post-game show. So we are going to talk about the Colts defense having arguably their best game in years, despite giving up 31 points. Like, on paper, like, I thought this is one of the best defensive performances we've seen from the Colts in years. Then we're going to talk about the offense and how that great defensive performance by the Colts didn't matter in the end, because the Colts offense put together one of the biggest travesties we've ever seen. But
Shocking.
First, Jake, we have to start with main storylines and big picture. Now, I know the Indianapolis Colts are not officially eliminated from the playoffs, but I mean, come on, they're eliminated from the playoffs with this. It's like, I don't know what the numbers are going to say, but it's officially done in my book. So this will be the 4th straight season that the Colts have missed the playoffs. This will be 3 of the last 4 seasons where they had a shot late in the year to win a pivotal game. Last year, it was in Week 18 against the Texans. 2021 with Carson Wentz, it was any of the last couple games, but especially that final game against the Jaguars, who were a terrible team. And then this year against the Denver Broncos, and they've produced duds in pretty much every one of those games. So I don't want to go on too big a rant here, Jake, and I do want to kick it to you, but at what point do you look at this roster that has basically been the exact same roster through all 4 years of missing the playoffs, including 3 times falling just short late and 1 time being an absolutely dreadful team in 2022? At what point do you look at this roster and say, maybe it's not just the quarterback? I know Richardson wasn't good in this game, and we will certainly talk about that, but at what point do you look at this roster and say, you know what? Maybe if we miss the playoffs every single year with pretty much the same team, maybe there's something more going on here than just the quarterback or just the coach. Maybe the team also has an issue.
Yeah, just recently we were talking about how this roster looks eerily similar to the 2022 disaster clown show season. A lot of the same guys involved. And at this point, you know, what do you feel attached to going into next year? I think you would come away with very little. There's some young players who you maybe want to put some patience in for, see what they look like to begin next year. But there's too little too late. I think there's been a lot of faith requested in things that are not coming to fruition whatsoever. Some of those guys we've been asked to be patient about have not panned out, or they're taking an excruciatingly long time to get to where they need to be. You've got a lot of money tied into guys that are not performing very well or adequately, or not showing up when they need to. But yeah, it does start at the top, man. Like this roster, how it's been put together, it obviously isn't working. How much longer can we blame Andrew Luck? Look at, you could probably come up with 4 or 5 examples of other teams across the league right now who have been able to reset and get back on track way quicker than the Colts have been trying to do since 2017. You can even say 2019 if you want to create a new era with Andrew Luck, but that by no means was a rebuild. It was just trying to replace your quarterback. And something has to change. Something huge has to change, because obviously this team it's the same story every year. Mediocre, and like you said, fighting for the playoffs at the end, not getting there, and then leaving fans incredibly furious by the end of the season, because there is so much potential there that is just not being met, and it's wildly frustrating. And again, what do you feel attached to going into 2025?
No, and I'll even build off that where, last year when the Colts missed the playoffs by one game, you had your backup quarterback starting that game. Your young, exciting quarterback wasn't in there. So you had that kind of out. It was the first year of your head coach. You had some players overperforming. And despite missing the playoffs last year, it felt like a bonus season where you could still find some things to feel good about. What is there to feel good about going into this next offseason? Your young quarterback finally got some games in, and by and large, it has not been a good season for him. Now, I do think he's been better since the benching, but this was a dud. This game was a dud from him. It's not that he wasn't the only player with a dud in this one, which we'll talk about in our other segments, but this was not a good game from him. And overall, most of this season has not been good from him. So you're not feeling great about your young quarterback going into next season. Your head coach seems like he took a step back. All your star players that you just paid a bunch of money to were either hurt or took major steps back. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor, we're not even just talking about this one game, but when you look at the overall season with those two players, I know Pittman's dealt with some injuries, but this has not been an $18 million per year receiver this year. Jonathan Taylor, I mean, yes, the offensive line's been banged up, but this has not been a star running back this season. Outside of Quentin Nelson and DeForest Buckner, who are your star players on this team? I don't think you have any. I don't think there's any other star player on this team besides your left guard and your 30-year-old defensive tackle. That's a problem. When you are a build through the draft team and you're not finding stars or difference makers in the draft, that is a major problem. And we are seeing it on Sundays. And again, the quarterback play this season was not good for the Colts. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's been perfect. There have been some games where it's been good, but for the most part, the quarterback play has not been great this season. But still, they are 1-7 against above 500 teams this year. You can point at the quarterback play all you want in some of these games, but that just tells me your roster is not ready to play against teams like that. They did not there's so many things I want to say right now, Jake, because it's not even just the fact that they can't compete in these games. It's just they don't have the discipline or the awareness. I don't know what it is. Because this game should have easily been won by the Colts. And they kept shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again until they lost and gave the game to the Broncos, who were also shooting themselves in the foot. They just stopped by the time the fourth quarter happened. So I don't know, man. I don't know where you go with this team going forward. Who do you feel good about? Like you said, who are you feeling good about? Who are the pillars of your team? Do you even have leadership on this team? Do you have young players you're excited about? Laiatu Latu looks like the third or fourth best pass rusher from this past class, which is still a decent young player, but you took him 15th overall. Jared Verse is lapping him in everything right now. A.D. Mitchell, what are you feeling good about going into next season with A.D. Mitchell? He got open a little bit early in the season, but whenever he started showing positives, he reverted back to negatives. So, I mean, you're a build through the draft team. You're not hitting on your draft picks. You're not bringing in outside help. Your players are undisciplined on Sundays. What are you leaning on to with this team going forward? I'm not going to sit here and say, fire Shane Steichen, fire the whole staff, get rid of Anthony Richardson. But I'm also not going to push back on people who say that, because I think you're well within your rights to have that opinion. I truly think you're rightful to have that opinion, because this is not good enough. And I mean, it obviously goes up to the top with Chris Ballard, which we'll talk about a lot this week and the rest of the season, because that's going to be the big talking point. But I don't know where you go with this team right now. It's not a particularly young and exciting team. It's a lot of guys getting paid that aren't playing well to that contract. And then your young quarterback's been very inconsistent at best. Your coach looks like he's regressing. I don't know what you're leaning into with this team going forward.
Yeah, you mentioned, the undisciplined part of it, and it's those just repeated mistakes and everything. And throughout most of the season, they were one of the least penalized teams. But now you had 5 offensive holding calls just on the offensive line in this one. That's not counting anything else. That's just 5 calls on the offensive line. Penalties have really been a problem over the last several games. The turnovers, just comically bad stuff. That's just stupid things that are happening on the field. Jonathan Taylor doing literally my least favorite thing any player ever does on a football field, which is dropping the football in front of the goal line, which is honestly you look at we've gone kind of big picture in this rather than this game, but the game changed in two ways. That play and then the Marvin Mims 61-yard punt return. Those two plays totally changed the game. But yeah, obviously much bigger conversation to be had about the big picture stuff later this week. But guys, here in a moment, we're going to talk about the offense and what kind of, started out really nice, but ultimately went wrong.
And we'd like to remind you guys that Locked On Colts is sponsored by BetterHelp. Now, guys, my favorite part of the holidays is not having to worry about the playoffs. The Colts make it so I don't even have to work through the playoffs. I get some nice off time, and I get to relax with my family, the ones I love that are closest to me. And I don't have to turn on football on Sundays and watch the Colts come playoff time because the Colts aren't in the playoffs. It's such a relaxing time. And guys, BetterHelp can help you find that zen that I find every single playoff season when it comes to covering this Colts team. So how do you guys stay cozy during the winter months? For some, wrapping up in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate or watching your favorite football team in the playoffs is the best way to spend the month of December and January. Well, guys, if you are missing out on some of that stuff, therapy is a great way to bring yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the season changes. I have used therapy in the past to, find my proper footing, find a crutch that I can really lean onto. And places like BetterHelp are fantastic for just finding peace of mind and really just figuring out things that work for you and get through this crazy life and through this crazy season for sure. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Like the Colts could switch GMs at any time for no additional charge, but we'll see if they end up doing that. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp, not with your Colts, but with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
And it's that time of year, guys. Playoffs. The college football playoff is back. There actually is playoff. IU and Notre Dame. Guys, lean into that. Go with the positives here. But the college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, so we got to start with the top pillar here on the offense, Zach. We're going to talk about Anthony Richardson real quick. Pretty standard stat line for him, 17 of 37, which is below 50%, 172 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks. As a rusher, I thought this was a really good game from him, though. 7 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, the meat of that done in the first half. He had the 23-yard touchdown run, and then he had a nice 12-yard run for a first down, like right up the middle earlier in the game as well. But as a passer, he, of course, had issues where guys could not catch the ball or get to the right spots for it. But by and large, this wasn't one of those games that I feel like we could point to a lot of every other things. Like, he was just not accurate in this one. I didn't feel like he was super scattershot and like not composed whatsoever, but like this was truly not a good game for him. He was under duress quite a bit. Obviously, Denver has the number one, pass rushing unit in the league. They lead the league in sacks, coming into it with 47. But yeah, this was not a good performance whatsoever, and those stats didn't even look that good until like later in the fourth quarter. So it was kind of even worse than what it appeared. So not a big performance from the top, and really not a great performance from just about anyone on the offense.
No, this was certainly not a game to write home for Anthony Richardson. It's not even a game, like you said, that we can like pick and choose some things. I mean, he had a couple good throws early in the game, like his first throw of the game to Michael Pittman, or to Josh Downs early in the game was a fantastic throw. It looked like it was going to be one of those good Anthony Richardson games, like through the first quarter, And then from the second quarter on, it was just a dreadful performance from him. And he's certainly a player where, and I think this is something that he really needs to work on, is aside from those like gotta have it, like down by one score with 2 minutes left type drives in the fourth quarter, when he starts having bad moments, they compile. They really do compile. He struggles to compose himself again, unless it's like a game-winning drive at the end. He somehow finds his composure then. But when it is like in the second quarter, in the third quarter, when he has a couple misses or a couple bad plays, it starts to compile. So that's where you see these games where he'll start like 3 or 4 passing for like 60 yards. And it's like, okay, cool. Like we're off to a good start with him. And then he'll miss like 2 or 3 passes and he'll be like 3 of 6, 3 of 7. And then it turns into 3 of 14 or 3 of 15. And it's like, okay, like, dude, we got to relax a little bit here. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with him right now is just that I don't want to say lack of composure, but just that ability to, and the inability to like rebound off of those poor mistakes and poor stretches, even when the poor stretches aren't fully on him. I mean, there will be plays where a free rusher gets in his face and he'll fight off the sack and throw the ball away. And that somehow builds into his inconsistencies and rushing things. And he just needs to calm down. So again, I think he probably is the Colts starting quarterback next season, and he will be for these final 3 games. So we'll see if he can improve upon that, but certainly not a game to write home for Anthony Richardson. I think it doesn't take away too much from how he's looked since the benching, but it still is another data point that we have to consider. And these last 3 games are going to be big for him to build some consistency and some momentum going into the offseason. So even if the Colts are out of the playoffs, at least Richardson gets more reps these final 3 weeks. So that'll be one thing we can watch, I guess, in these final 3 weeks.
Yeah, and the shame of it was it kind of sucks that this was one of his messier games, because he did do some truly special things in terms of escaping pressure. Like, he had some of the Broncos defenders pissed that they could not bring him down, but those didn't really lead to anything. There were drops or just errant throws or what have you, but it just was not a fruitful endeavor. And then you look beyond him. This was, Jonathan Taylor had a pretty strong performance, but unfortunately it was wasted by one ugly moment. 22 carries for 107 yards, which was just under 5 yards per carry. Like, if that play is completed to how it's supposed to be, then this is kind of a vintage Jonathan Taylor performance. He had the 41-yard touchdown, but of course the biggest bonehead gaffe possible. The ground game altogether, 149 yards is the most that Denver has given up all year, and they were a legitimately good run defense. I think they were top 3 in yards per carry and top 5 in yards per game. So when you marry those 2 things together, like, that's a really good front. And we obviously know that they can rush the passer. So this is like a truly, truly top-notch front 7. And there was just like some big things wasted about that. Again, Anthony was not able to finish things that he started out really well. And then obviously that drop just kind of set the tone for the rest of the game, because they never rebounded from that whatsoever. They carried that 13-7 lead into halftime. The defense gets the interception off Bo Nix to start the second half. And then boom, 2 plays later, that's what happens. I even tweeted, I was like, it looks like the Colts are running away with this one. And then, it's not a touchdown. It's actually a touchback. And then here you go. Luckily, the Broncos offense was not able to really get their footing for quite some time until later. So it bought the Colts offense some time to get their act together. But of course, they never did.
Yeah. I had someone say, like, if Taylor doesn't drop the ball, do the Colts win the game? Well, if I were a Bills podcaster, I'd be a little bit happier, I guess, right now. Like, we could say ifs all we want. Like, if this, if that. Like, the thing is, it happened. He dropped the ball short of the end zone. And it cost this team a lot of momentum. Now, we can talk about how there has to be a coaching issue or something with the players to where if you can't mentally rebound on offense following a moment like that, and it just crumbles your entire game from that when you're still leading in the game. Heck, your defense got you another turnover like a couple plays later. Like, if that derailed your entire offense, then yeah, there's some other conversations we need to have. Maybe the super young coaching staff isn't up to task when it comes to the offense, but it's just an inexcusable. That's a team captain. That's a team captain pulling something like that. A guy who held out all of last offseason because he needed his new contract and his bigger money, and you have a chance to run the team into the playoffs, or at least put them up 13 in a game where your defense is playing lights out. And honestly, I can't really say what happens if he crosses the goal line there, but maybe we're having a happy post game right now if he crosses the goal line, because it looked like 20-7 in the middle of the third quarter felt like an insurmountable lead with how the Colts defense was playing. So I don't want to put everything on Jonathan Taylor, but look, you're a team captain who's getting paid a ton of money. Like, it just can't happen. And then to have the Pittman fumble too, another team captain getting paid tons of money. Again, this kind of goes to what we said in the first segment. Like, these are your star players. These are your difference maker players. Your players who are supposed to make the average play into something phenomenal. The players who bail out your quarterback and make your quarterback look better, who make your offense look better because they can do these superhuman things. They are getting paid that kind of money. They're getting paid money to make big plays in big games like this. And to have one of them drop the ball at the goal line going in, which changed all the momentum, and then have the other one, fumble a very basic hit on the sideline, like, it's just inexcusable, man. And we can point fingers at 1,000 different people here, but the two star players on the Colts offense, the two star players, let the team down in this game, and it spiraled from there. So, yeah, there's plenty of blame to point out Shane Steichen for his play calling and Richardson for his performance. It wasn't good. The offensive line wasn't good in this game either. Really, frankly, nobody was good on offense. But at the end of the day, Taylor and Pittman are captains who are paid tons of money to make big plays, and they let the team down in a huge playoff must-win game. And that's my biggest takeaway is, how do you feel about those guys going forward? I mean, those are supposed to be your big-time players, and we've seen a whole year of just nothing from them, and then to let them down like this in the biggest game, like, it's bad, man. It's really bad.
Yeah, honestly, those guys like that underperforming is one of the biggest reasons I think some people want to just hit the reset button. And again, feast or famine on this thing. 5 turnovers, 1 trip to the red zone. It's this offense is all or nothing, and that's been the case all year. But guys, we're going to get a little bit positive. If there's any silver lining in this, the defense really held up well until the dam broke, and then it just kind of got out of control. But some pretty good performances. All right, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers, you guys can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of the game that you got to go with, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Going into this one, FanDuel had the Broncos as 4.5-point favorites. Nice. Very well done, FanDuel. Hopefully you guys indulged in that as well. The total point over-under was 43.5, and this was 44. So, wow. Okay. That was a very razor-thin margin, so hopefully that panned out for you guys. Whether you're voting for or against the Colts, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so the defense started out really hot and really kept it up all the way up until about midway through the fourth quarter, when they just, as we've seen multiple times this season, could not carry the weight of the team on their back. There were some conversations I had this week where it's like, the Colts don't particularly match up well with Denver. What is a path to victory for them? And it was kind of Bo Nix turning into a pumpkin, and finally having a bad game. And that happened. 3 interception game, did it throughout the first and second half. This was Bo Nix's worst performance, and the defense made him pay for it. Again, 3 picks. They had him moving around quite a bit. They held the run game in check. I mean, this isn't a prolific run team anyways, but, just 72 yards on 27 carries. That's not even 3 yards per carry. Cortland Sutton was held in check until the end of the fourth quarter. Like, the defense was doing great. And we've been accustomed to the bend but don't break defense that has both bent and broke at times lately, but they didn't do either until late in the game in this one. They were shutting it down. And, if you get an offense that's capitalizing on that and you're playing complementary football, then you can start changing your strategy and pinning your ears back and getting after the passer even more and creating more distance in the score. And once again, this team cannot play 60 minutes of both sides of the ball functioning properly.
No, if we learned anything about this Colts team this season is consistency is not a word that applies to this team whatsoever, or even just stringing together good play. Like, you'll never see that with this team this season, and that's why we call this a merciful ending to this season, because we don't have to worry about that anymore. But no, I thought, honestly, for a majority of this game, I thought this was one of the best defensive performances we have seen from the Colts in years. I would go as far as to say the best of the Gus Bradley era. I think they showed up in a playoff game, in a playoff caliber game. They showed up. I mean, I said in our Friday show, my keys for the defense was give me something in run defense, please tackle for the first time this season, and we need the turnovers back. This defense cannot survive without turnovers. And what did we get in this game? Fantastic tackling performance from this defense. There were a couple missed tackles here and there, but that's normal. That happens. I thought they did a really good job rallying to the ball, making plays, getting a lot of run stops. The run defense was really good in this one, and the turnovers were there. And you know what? We have been very critical on the linebackers this season. I thought Zaire Franklin had his best game of the season, like by far and away. I thought he looked like a legitimately very good linebacker in this game. So big shout out to him. I thought he really showed up in this one. DeForest Buckner showed up. Cross and Womack made those big plays for interceptions in the back end.
Kenny had a big performance, I thought.
Kenny had a really good game. Like, the defense came to play in this game. But again, how many times can we say it this year where one side came to play and the other side didn't? We had the Jaguars lost early in the year. The offense came to play. The defense didn't. We had the Vikings lost in primetime. The defense came to play. The offense didn't. It's just kind of at the tail of this season. So, yeah, it's all for naught, that the defense put together this fantastic performance, but their offense and then their special teams as well. We don't have time to talk about their special teams, but yes, let's kick right back to Marvin Mims after he had two other big returns. Let's kick it back to him a third time. Maybe this time you won't have a big return. But yeah, I thought the defense was constantly put on their back. They were put in horrible situations over and over, and they stood on their head and gave the Colts a chance to win until, it all came apart late in the game. But big credit to Gus Bradley and the defense. And you know what? I do want to end today's episode talking about it like this, Jake. We have been big proponents of saying that if the Colts make any change this offseason, regardless of how this season ends, it'll probably just be Gus Bradley fired and bring everybody back, including all the players that are starting, and they'll just change Gus Bradley and say that that's their accountability type thing. That's the change they have to make. But we're looking at this playoff game right here. And is anyone going to buy that just firing Gus Bradley and bringing somebody else in changes everything for this team? I'm not saying Gus Bradley has done everything to deserve keeping his job or anything, but in the biggest game of the season, the defense wasn't the problem. And the defense doesn't have that much talent, especially, the offense, again, how many big-time players you got paid on offense? How many high draft picks do you have on offense? On defense, they're starting a waiver wire outside corner, a 7th-round corner, a 3rd-round corner, Nick Cross, who was on the bench for a couple years. Franklin and Speed have been here for a while, but yeah.
Speed's a 5th rounder.
Yeah, day 3.
7th rounder.
They're not starting these high-end draft pick guys. These are guys that they had to find to plug in and play, and they put up a great performance in a game that they needed to win. So I am not going to fall for the trap this offseason of when they fire Gus Bradley, and that's the only move they make, of being like, okay, now it's serious time with this defense. We're going to change things up. It's like, yeah, the defense was an issue for a lot of the year, but come on, really? That's the only issue is just Gus Bradley? I'm not going to let them talk me into him being the scapegoat for this season. I'm not saying he deserved to keep his job, but I'm not going to let him be the scapegoat for sure.
There's one every year, and it's...
Yeah. I'm not going to buy the Chris Ballard, we are close. We're close. Especially if they finish 9-8 this year, he's going to be like, we're kind of close. Richardson takes a step and we change up the defense. then we'll be a playoff team next year. I'm not buying it this next offseason. Like I didn't buy it last year either.
That's what they sold everybody heading into this year.
Yeah.
And they didn't even believe it because they yanked Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. Like, again, man, I don't know. Like, where do you go with this team? Where do you go with this team, man? I don't know. I don't know what to do.
I'm picturing the gif of Ron Swanson marching to the dumpster with his computer and tossing it in. I think a lot of people are feeling that way right now.
Yeah, like honestly, I don't know if I can say get rid of blow everything up and fire everybody and all that, but if anyone says that, I don't have any pushback.
I think a reset is way more reasonable than last offseason's approach.
Yeah.
Like if you have to lean one way or another, you have to lean way closer to the rebuild. And I'm not necessarily saying hit the nuclear button, but there has to be drastic changes made. Like you said, Gus cannot be the only thing that happens. He's been
the reset button or like push all like this is not me saying the joking way, but like actually push some chips in to try to get some star talent with this team. Like get somebody that is a difference maker this offseason. One of the guys, like two of the guys they were trying to go get in free agency were Xavier McKinney and Daniil Hunter, but they were just a little too expensive. Like we couldn't shell out the cash for that stuff. I'm not saying they fix everything, but they've been stars for their respective teams this season. Maybe go out there and get a star player in free agency. Maybe, I don't know, hit on a draft pick for the first time since 2021 or 2022, whatever it was with Bernhard Raimann. Like there needs to be some kind of change though. Like I don't think any, like I know none of us really bought it last year or anything, but is anyone really going to buy it this offseason, especially if Chris Ballard says we're close, like, and they bring in like, a punter on like a 2-year deal and that's their only free agent signing and they re-sign EJ Speed and everybody else. Like there's no excuse this time. There's no, we're close. There's no anything like that. Like there's no argument that I can hear outside of major changes, whether that's a major change in philosophy or a major change in roster, major change in coaching, whatever it's going to be, major change in quarterback even. I need something to change. It can't just be this exact same thing over and over again. So, man, I don't know. I'm just frustrated. I know I'm ranting right now, but
hey,
it's just embarrassing.
That's what everybody's doing at the moment. Let it breathe.
Yeah. They're 1-7 this year against above 500 teams. They just can't be on the same field with these teams right now.
I think the worst, I don't want to say the worst thing that can happen, but they have 3 doormats they're going up against in these next few weeks. They could very well go 3-0. Not necessarily going to win comfortably, but win 3-0. Let's say one score victories. What cannot happen is look how we finished the season. Things are looking up, this and that. Like, cannot do it. The summation of the season ended today.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, you cannot really take anything else that happens the next few games unless it's even uglier play to just like keep padding to that argument. But victories in this, when it's 3 of the worst teams in football, like you cannot use that as the arrows pointing up by any means.
Yeah. And guys, going forward, we're going to focus more of this show on the macro of the team. It's not going to be, what the Colts need to do to beat the Titans, because who cares? Who cares what they need to do to beat the Titans? We're going to talk about what's going forward with Chris Ballard, going forward with Gus Bradley, Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson. Like, we're going to talk about the big picture stuff on this show. Like, sure, our Friday episodes and our Thursday episodes, we'll still be looking at the upcoming game, but we're going to use the early weeks, these next couple weeks, to early week episodes to really talk about this team, because that's what matters right now. This team and stuff going forward. It doesn't matter the rest of this season, because they're not going to sell me on beating the Giants and Tommy DeVito, or Tim Boyle was out there again. We could see him for the second time this season. If they beat Tim Boyle in New York, you're not going to sell me on momentum, okay, with this team. So we have a lot to talk about, obviously, going forward. We do want to thank you guys, though, for making Locked On Colts your first post-game listen today, and for making us your first listen on all those other episodes coming up in the future. Next, go find Locked On NFL with the madman Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, Follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we list your podcasts. We love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon or maybe Tuesday afternoon. We'll see. One of these days in the afternoon.